Hey, Tracy Ariel here, and I wanted to tell you my story about why I know that writing is active and can lead to a great deal of personal development, and why I call my course Write2Grow. I'm going to give you four examples from my own life, the really big examples. If you saw my reminiscing from Manhattan Beach, you know that my relationship with my husband began with an article that I did on his solar call project for the Plattsburgh Press Republic. And we've been together now so far for 21 years. We have two children, and it's been such an adventure building a life with him. The other, so obviously that's the biggest example that how I know that writing changed my life. There are lesser examples too, things that are more professional maybe. Another one is actually began with someone else's article that they did about a Canadian Vietnam veteran monument that was moving from St. Catharines to Mellocheville. And I saw this with great interest because I have two uncles who volunteered in Vietnam, and I always had been curious about what their experiences were like. And so I went to the monument opening, and I met some of the Vietnam vets and found out that they were looking for help. Many of them were traveling down to the U.S. To get health care, and there were a whole bunch of other ways in which they were being maltreated, I thought. And so my research led to a book called I Volunteered, Canadian Vietnam Vets Remember. I talked about the stories about Canadian Vietnam veterans in Canada, and it was really important to me to bring their experiences to light, and that led to a trip going down to the wall in Washington, and I'm still talking to them almost every year, and the 20th anniversary of my book will be coming out in November, and I will probably do a telesummit and interview some of those veterans and some of the work that they've been doing for their fellow veterans to help improve their health and their livelihood in Canada. And it's just been an inspiring group of people to get to know. I'm just thrilled to have been able to work with them. So that's a very big way in that writing still changes my life. Another example is some of the work that I did for Ulysses. I have done, actually that all began with a letter that I wrote to them when I first moved to Montreal. I wrote to them a letter saying that I wanted to do a book about cycling in Toronto because I had just moved from Toronto. I knew the cycling trails there very well. They had just released a cycling guide to Ontario, and I thought it would be a great follow-up to focus on the ones around Toronto. But they decided not to do that project, but they held on to my letter, and 8 years later, they contacted me when they were looking at doing a hiking guide to Ontario. And so I did that, and that led to some great family adventures, exploring some of the trails in Ontario. And that led to the Trans-Canada Trail Association contacting me to cover their trail, which led to the most rewarding travel trip that I've done, which was with my two kids, who were at that time 9 and 5. My husband dropped us all off in Niagara Falls, and then we went along the shores of Lake Erie and up into, across to Bradford, and then across the Grand River, and into Toronto, and then up into Peterborough. It was a 6-week extravaganza on the Trans-Canada Trail. Fabulous adventure, and it was the beginning of my revelation about how to parent differently. On that trip, each one of us had jobs. We were all very equal, and it worked really wonderfully. And so from then on, I looked for ways to become a more egalitarian parent. My husband and I created family meetings along with the kids, and we looked, in which each one of us had one vote. And so the most remarkable rule that we created was that parents have the right to create rules between meetings, and it was unanimous. The kids had no problem with us creating rules. They just wanted their say in how we were all living together. And I just think that that was a great. It changed everything, and it began with a letter that I wrote to a publisher. And the last example about how writing can change your life is I wanted to talk about a series of articles that I wrote about low-cost housing for a local newspaper called The Suburban, including a story in which somebody was evicted for less than $5 overdue, which actually is quite common for low-cost housing, which just shows how incredibly how under pressure the whole system is. And that series of articles was just one of the many articles that I write for that local newspaper, which is run by somebody. The editor there sees journalism as an act of social justice, and he sees the act of journalism as a way to change the world. And it's just a wonderful opportunity to work with a whole team of people who use writing as an opportunity to explore how our local communities work. It's hyper-local news, and so everybody who is doing something in the community gets mentioned, and yet every single story links to a wider issue, both in our city, in our province, in our country, and in the world. It talks about the kinds of stories that we cover the gamut from health and security and housing and seniors issues and people trying to create projects that will make the world a better place. And it's just a great opportunity to work with a bunch of people who, like me, believe that you can write to change the world. And so that's why I have created the course Write2Grow. And this is why I believe that you can write to grow. And in the next video, I'll be talking to you about how to go about doing that for yourself. I hope that you'll watch me, and if you want to follow this video series in your inbox, then click on the link below to join my email list. And look forward to talking to you in video 2.